what do we have for hour 2?
Absolutely hilarious.
All
We're gonna take one of the toddlers that he sent around. Because it's so funny.
All right. Let me let Todd read them. Give me your poll questions.
Okay, one of them has to do with Kelly Stafford, Matthew Stafford's wife. She has a podcast, and she decided to share on her podcast how Matthew's having trouble dealing with the younger players. He can't relate to them, and somehow she felt like that was okay to share that publicly and not leave that to Matthew and his team to deal with in the locker room. So if I'm having issues with my employer and or coworkers, I would, here's your choices, hope my spouse or significant other would handle it for me. Address the situation directly with those parties, seems like common sense. Express my concerns in the nearest suggestion box.
Okay, if I go home and I say something about the Danettes, and then my wife has a podcast and she goes on and starts talking about why I don't like Fritzy, then that's on me and on her. But I have to understand what is private and what is going to be used for your podcast. I would have a problem with that if I'm Matthew Stafford, that if I say something to my wife like, I can't relate. Now, I'd like to understand the context of it. In fairness to Matt and his wife, that was it I can't relate to these guys. This is really troubling. Or is it affecting your job? Or could it be, man, I'm so old, and trying to relate to somebody 15 years younger, and I don't know what they're doing. They're always on their phones, and the music they listen to. Okay, that's fine, but it felt like, I can't relate to these kids. Yes, Todd.
So now all future communication between Matthew and his wife, he has to say, this is off the record, not for your podcast. Pass the rolls.
Or maybe he's fine with it. Because he's aware she has a podcast. She's had one for a while.
Okay, would you have a problem if you're Matthew Stafford that this got out? Todd?
Yes, I would.
All right. Seton?
Yeah.
Yeah. Marvin?
Yes.
Paulie?
Only if I said not to say it. If I said it's between us and not for the podcast. Because he's got to be aware that a big chunk, I've heard her podcast before, a big chunk of it is talking about what her husband does for a living. This is not a rare topic on the podcast. It's the topic on the podcast, is being the wife of an NFL star. She talks about what he says.
Wait, but he has to now say, hey, this is off the record.
She's a journalist.
Well, not necessarily off the record, but if they have conversations of the week, and she always talks about what those two talk about during the week, and that's her a big chunk of her podcast.
Yeah.
I would say that it's up to him to say, hey, this one's between us.
Yes, Todd.
I don't know. It seems that there has to be a certain amount of common sense to say, this doesn't seem like the kind of thing I should be telling the world. Not that she has this great ratings and following, but it just doesn't seem like it should be coming from her. And maybe at the very least, she should say, can I mention that on the show? Are you sensitive to that? Is that cool if I kind of throw it out there on the podcast?
Maybe she did, but, she might want to be a star. No, she might want, well, if you got a podcast, she wants the attention. You certainly got it. But I would have a problem if I said something in confidence to my wife, and she should know what should get out there. That's when she should say back to him, hey, is it okay if I mention that on the podcast? And maybe it happened, but I have a problem with that. All righty.
It is interesting. Stafford told his wife that, back when he started, the players would play ping pong and play games and play cards and everything. And he says now the players, the minute practice is over and the shower's done, they sit with a hoodie up with their phone on, and it's phone and then to the car and to the hotel or to their house. And it's not very competitive in the locker room. There's not stuff going on. There's not, broing out going on.
Team building.
He said it has a different era, and he said a lot of it was the phones.
Yes, Todd.
It seems silly coming from me, I know, because I'm the least confrontational of many, many people, but you need to just address with the players. Guys, let's talk here. You don't have to call me sir. We're on the same level. We're teammates. Put your phones down. Let's talk and make some eye contact here. This is a little silly. I got to go through your hoodies and your phones to get your attention. And just something leadership.
Yeah, but your
related.
daughter did speak on your behalf at my Christmas party.
And she was like 6 at the time.
But she did. Something was said at home.
Yeah, well, she didn't like the way she watched a little of the shows, and she realized that, with the pies in the face, and she didn't like your tone towards me a couple of times, and she took it upon herself to walk into your house for the Christmas party and say, I got my eye on you. I don't like how you're talking to my dad.
But you probably say stuff with your wife. You share things with her.
I complain from time to time, but I don't call specific people out. It's more of a frustrating situation. I get, by the time I get home after an hour drive, I'm pretty much cooled off if something upset me.
Okay. Well, that's good. All right.